Are in the world. We've got another episode of WorldVenture in Review. We have a special guest, and we have Ellen Warneke, right? Is the last name?
That is correct.
Ellen Warneke, and she works at Black Forest Academy. But I'm going to let her introduce you. So go ahead, Ellen, or introduce herself. Go ahead, Ellen.
Thanks. I'm Ellen Warneke, and I have had the privilege of serving at Black Forest Academy in southeast or southwestern Germany for about 10, 11 years now. I grew up in Minnesota, and studied education there, and then came to join the faculty at BFA. And it's a delight to be talking to you.
Awesome. So you live in Germany.
Yes.
So what is, I have my favorite cafes and places, haunts that I like to go to. What's your favorite restaurant or cafe in Germany and why?
So I'm definitely a local kind of person. So I like to find local kinds of things. So there's actually a little cafe that just opened up in August of 2022, called the Garden Bistro, that I've been really enjoying going to this year. And I love that because it's a place where, I see the same proprietor there all the time. Just enjoy seeing other local people coming through. It's a place where it feels just homey to be in there. So that's kind of a favorite.
Awesome. So what's the difference between a restaurant or cafe in Germany and America? What is the notable difference that you see?
Well, I'm going to speak to something really specifically for me. I'm allergic to dairy. And so I particularly enjoyed this cafe because they have non-dairy milk options, which is not something I can find very often.
Awesome. So I want to let everyone know as we talk, it's okay to put questions in the chat, and it's okay to kind of interrupt, so to speak, because we love to be interrupted. So please ask questions, put your comments in. I'll make sure that Ellen gets those comments and questions, as well as I put Ellen's giving link ministry profile in the chat. So if you would like to take a look at that, we'll be discussing some of those options today. So Ellen, tell me about. You wrote a really great description about your family online, and so tell me about how your family inspired your love of missionaries as a child.
Yeah. So I would say my family. I'd almost use the word maybe liturgy or the habituation of language in the way that love, care for missionaries was part of my growing up experience. I mean, one of my favorite memories looking back now related to that is when we go on walks or even bike rides through town. My mom has an incredible eye for finding money on the ground.
Oh, that's handy.
But we had this habit that she taught us that if she found money on the ground, she'd stop, she'd pick it up, and she'd say, "Pray for the missionaries." And then she'd bring it home, and she had a jar, and she'd put that money that she found in this jar. And when we filled it up, we'd pick a missionary that we would donate that to. And it wasn't that it was, huge amounts of money, but it was just this habit of life that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, just again that habit of language and value that was so much a part of growing up. And there were prayer cards all over the refrigerator and bulletin boards of all the people. My mom's employment. I mean, she so much was working just to have money to be generous and support missionary students that were going on short-term trips or otherwise. That was just so much a part, even from a young age. If my parents were going to a missions conference or banquet or something like that, they wouldn't get a babysitter. We'd be going along with them. That was, I really appreciated that was a value that they instilled in us.
Awesome. So you went to, you did some short-term missions trips to Bolivia, and of course I'm going to do a shout out to Rob and Lisa Atkins, who are in Bolivia, and I think we have a short-termer there as well still. But tell me about what did you learn? I mean, we all learn something. We hear about missions, we read about missions, but it's a whole different thing leading one and being there.
Yeah.
So what did you learn on your very first missions trip to Bolivia?
Yeah. Well, I would say, I mean, that first trip was incredible in a unique way because I was a leader on the trip, but my younger brother was along as a student on the trip. So there was something really sweet about that and being involved in that trip together. But over the course of time, we in that first trip connected with the missionaries that were on the field there, and built relationships. As then in the continuing years, we saw the same people every year go back. I think it
Oh,
was
that's awesome.
6-7 times going down. And I think some of the things that I saw in that was missionaries are real people with real challenges. With that, it's not there's not like a holiness spell or something that you get when you go overseas. So in seeing that there, I so appreciated hearing, particularly the one missionary that we connected with the most. She was a chiropractor, doing like service that you ever think like, oh, that someone could be doing chiropractic work as a missionary, and that's what she did, and had this incredible opportunity to connect with the people at the homes for girls or
Yeah.
that. And so to see, oh wow, like real people with real skills that talk about Jesus in what they do, and also who need Jesus. Like I loved listening to this woman talk about her need for how Jesus was with her in her day to day, just like I got to go to the grocery store, or I've got to get my laundry done. I've got to figure out how I'm having, like this frustration with a colleague, and that's part of life.
Mm-hmm.
So that was for sure one thing that I saw a lot. But then the other part of that was, these families whose their kids would come and translate for our team. And a lot of what I ended up doing as a leader on the trip was talking to our these students that would come and translate for us, and they talk about their schooling experience or the things that were hard for their families. And I just realized the need for healthy family life for these
Yes.
missionary families, how much the kids' schooling mattered to
Mm-hmm.
them, that they're just teenagers who want to have a good schooling experience, who've got dreams of where they want to go after they graduate.
Exactly.
And yeah. So that was a lot of conversations.
Well, and that's I like what you said, the real skills down there. I mean, in any of we have WorldVenture has so many openings for people with real skills, from medical to technology and everything, opportunities. And if you want to look at that, everyone out there, you can go to worldventure.com and you can look under Explore, under the Explore tab, and you can find any opportunities. You could see the real skills out there. So what made you decide? I mean, you were teaching in Minnesota. Oh, we got someone here. We've got someone, Joel Arco, welcome. He says, let's say you were leading a Bible study in Germany. Do the Germans want you to speak English or German? My experience in Germany is that if you make one little mistake while speaking German, they will immediately turn the conversation to English.
I can give a quick response to that. One, so much of my work is working with students who are speaking English. So it's not as much with my ministry is not as much with our German community. However, I do love the opportunities, like saying going to this cafe and interacting with Germans. And my experience has been like my landlords are incredible. They will muddle through my practicing German. For how long I've been here, my German is not nearly to the degree that I would like to see that. But they are so patient and so willing to muddle through with me.
I had a friend in another mission org, but she was when I went on to see her down in Honduras, her friend who did a lot of the great cooking would never speak English in front of her, would always speak Spanish in front of her, and so
Yeah.
and she was always forgiving. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
So you've gone. I hope that answered your question, Joel. Thank you for putting a comment. That's a great question. What made you decide? Because you were teaching in the regular U.S.
Yeah.
school
Yep.
and in Minnesota, which I hear is very cold.
It
Um,
is.
and you suddenly decided to move, or not suddenly, but you moved to Germany and started teaching at Black Forest Academy. So tell me about that process. What moved you from U.S. schools to Germany?
Yeah. Well, I would say, I mean, with even the experience growing up as a child and how much my parents instilled that value of missions, I would say that vaguely, as a from the time I was a child, I had a vague in the back of my mind thinking someday I'm going to go overseas, right? And I'd say from early college, that was a much more um, a specific decision that it was, I want to spend some time overseas. Now, in my mind as a college student, I I could I could hardly picture what long term meant. So to me, long term was 2 years. So I'm like, so I've gotten
That's
into
an
I'm
interesting
gonna
perspective.
be a long term missionary for like at least 2 years. Um, yeah. So, but I also had enough, well, I don't know, I think self awareness that in terms of adjustment and transition, I didn't want to start teaching. I'd heard from my professors enough that your first year of teaching is hard. So I did not want to do my first year of cross cultural living and teaching in the first year. So I was in this mind, someday I'm gonna go overseas. Someday I'm gonna go overseas. Well, these trips, in the meantime, I'm in college, post college teaching. I'm going down to Bolivia year after year. And even one time walking onto I don't know if we have anybody at the Santa Cruz Christian Learning Center, but that was the school that we were connecting with a lot. A lot of our kids would come attend that school. Walking for the first time onto that campus, I was like, I can see myself in a place like this. Like not necessarily this place, but this environment where it's serving these missionary kids and helping their families be in a healthy place before. So anyway, I'm going year after year, and I get to know some of the kids. I get to know their families, and there was one year where one of the I think it was one of the dads, but it was one of the families was like, "You keep coming down here. When are you just going to stay?" And that I feel like that comment was the Holy Spirit speaking to me, saying, "You keep saying someday, and you need to start talking about when." It's actually going to happen. And so, yeah, that was sort of the prompting that got me looking at various schools. I had a friend who had connected with Black Forest Academy, so I knew a little bit about the school because of her. Yeah, and yeah, just kept going in the process, engaged in conversation with a couple different schools, and just felt like the Lord was directing me to be at home.
Awesome. Yeah, usually I find that it does take a little bit of a process. I mean,
Yeah.
I still remember that my own process where it was like a year before God saying missions, missions. I'm like, I don't want to do that. And a year later, okay, where?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and it's neat to see the ways that the Lord does direct that. There was when I was in college, a sermon that at my church one Sunday that was that like, okay, this has been a vague thing in the back of my mind. Now it's the next step. But I think that I tend to make decisions like a crock pot. Like there's a lot of things that I'm always stirring, and then it comes, that question of, okay, when are you just going to stay becomes oh yeah, okay, now it's time to set the table and serve the chili.
I love that. That is a perfect description of it. It's slow cooking, as it's building the flavor and all that. Yeah, I love it. It makes me hungry as we speak. So what made you why is Black Forest Academy important to missionary families? I mean, I know that they're spread out all over the place. So why is this important to missionary families and especially to the kids? Why is this school so important?
Yeah. So education for their children is really significant for missionary parents, for their missionary families, and they want their kids to be in a good place. And very often there aren't educational options at different points as you're going through that schooling where that becomes not a good fit for whatever reason, because there's not the rigor of courses that is needed, or there's not even just like language level that you might have a certain high level course, but the student doesn't have the language to engage in that. Or there are social dynamics at play, or just a whole variety of reasons why the education system where a family is serving, it just isn't a good fit anymore for their kids. And so then they start going, well, do we need to leave the field? Is this the end of this story? And BFA can be that bridge, that way that says, hey, you can still be on the field. You can continue in your ministry in a place where you know your child is cared for, where they're getting the education, quality education. And for many of them, where it's still feasible for them very often to be very connected and to come and visit the school and be part of a lot of the really significant parts of school life for their child, while knowing that they're in a place where they're also, I mean, like for our kids, it's a big deal that they're around others who have had similar experiences. And that's a huge thing for them coming into an educational schooling environment. I think I see so often our kids have such an incredible, I think, unusual kindness towards one another because so many of them have experienced being the outsider.
Yep.
Yeah.
So share about how your different roles made a positive impact with students. You've had different roles. You've been a teacher, then a vice principal, now a principal. So how are you having the positive impact with the students?
Yeah. So I would say, as a teacher, there's a more focused opportunity to be. You've got a smaller group of students that you see every day, and so just that continuity of the messages that you can communicate, and hopefully building a love of learning. I've seen some of that. One of the things I taught language. I was a Spanish teacher, and I just loved in that class the opportunities to talk about how God gives us language to connect with one another and build empathy. And so it was really neat for me a couple of years ago already now, because it's been a number of years since I've been teaching Spanish, but had a mom come back to me after her son graduated, and he struggled through my Spanish class. It was not his natural, but he did it. And she's like, it's so neat. He's now working someplace in the US, I think it was a golf course or something like that. He's like, but so many of his colleagues are Spanish speakers. And so he's muddling through his Spanish, working on that to be able to communicate and build a relationship with them. And that's just so heartwarming. Say, okay, we talk about, like, this is a way to build empathy. This is a way to connect with others, to know that language. So yeah, that's been something that's been really neat from the teaching side. And from the administrative side, I love that at this level, I know the name of every student on our campus. And so, like, I love waiting out at in the morning as they're walking into school or coming off the buses, and to be able to greet every one of those students by name. And, it's those small things that communicate care. So I've loved that. It's Friday, so I'm wearing orange. It's my favorite color. And so many of our students at this point, like, they know, they'll ask me, Miss Warneke, where's your orange today? Friday, where's your orange today? But the other side of that is, like, building those relationships gives a lot of opportunity when I do end up having a lot of conversations with students who are just maybe struggling to adjust or not always making the best decisions. And I was trying to think, there's this quote in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia. I wish I could remember the exact quote, but it's the end where there's this, just the sun rises. It's a beautiful sunrise. And Edmund describes afterwards, he's like, there were so many other things that were more exciting on our voyage, on our trip, that sound more exciting, but that really was the most exciting when the sun rose. And that's how I feel like so much of my job are those kinds of things where it's like, it doesn't sound exciting, but when you're sitting in the office with a student who's just been making, poor choice after poor choice, and are able to say, this doesn't define you. This this you are more than this choice that you've made. How can we bring reconciliation and redemption from this situation? Yeah, I've loved to see those stories.
I love that. I love that. That's a good way to turn it around. We have Chris Bryant. You might know him a little bit.
You know, Chris.
Chris said, Ellen is an amazing resource and encouragement to us as daily teacher. Her experience and energy combined with encouraging words and wise solutions help all of us teachers be better. When she observes us, she gives us big picture ideas and helps us implement them in the classroom. She also knows all the students in the bigger context and helps us see the big picture. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
So just as a reminder, you all can put comments and questions in. It's not interrupting us. This is we are very informal here. So please do leave your comments or questions in as we talk about different subjects today. One of the things I do want to bring to your focus is that Ellen is at 50% support with WorldVenture. So if you feel led to help her out, the giving link is in the chat. So go ahead and click on that. You heard her story about the change that her mother picked up in a jar. That's something you can do to help support missions and help support her work with kids and other teachers. So let's go on to the important question. So what are your prayer needs right now?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Say so much just personally that I have such a desire for wisdom in my role. And I say, like, the number of times I'm in conversations with students that are those discipling contexts, I want them to see Jesus in the way that they're treated, the way that we engage in learning. And so just wisdom for that, I would appreciate very much. And in working with the rest of it, there's a great team here. And my role is one part of our whole picture, but we've got our our residence life team and our chaplains team and the athletic team and the nurses and the counselors and this whole group of people that are supporting our students. And so as I work with them as well, just pray for wisdom in that. And then on a very practical level, we still need staff for next year. To serve a school, and it is those practical skills. It matters that there are people that are here our students want excellent teachers, and so we need an English teacher for next year. We need more academic support department staff for next year. We still need resident assistants in the dorm, and so those are all the teaching side of it is the ones where I'm having to figure out, okay, if we don't have teachers coming in, what classes can we offer? What does it mean for those staff that are here? And what additional load are they able to take on? And so, that would be a huge prayer as well.
And if any of you want to be an answer to prayer and you want to apply, go to worldventure.com/go to talk to someone about going to Black Forest Academy. And if any of you would like to put in a prayer for Ellen in the chat, it could be to help you out. Just put Dear Lord and go ahead and write out a prayer. I'll make sure she gets them. We might read a couple of them online too in a prayerful way. But if you put them in the chat, you could be praying right now for Ellen's prayer requests. So let's talk about topics that we've had on WorldVenture over the past week. We've had a lot of topics, and as you know, when we post stuff, we really do love conversation. So we are not shy about answering your questions online. But we had one of our academic global workers who's in Costa Rica, Drew Brown. If he is listening, hello out there, if you're out there somewhere. He wrote something called Finding the Right Hills to Die On. It's a book commentary. So one of the things that is interesting about his blog is it brings up how do you work the topic of a diverse population. So as a principal, how do you keep everyone with different opinions or different viewpoints unified in Christ?
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And I will say I'm really grateful that I'm not that responsibility doesn't fall solely on me. And I think the reality is none of those things can fall solely on one person, right? But I will say one of the things that I have appreciated at BFA is our leadership has put together a monthly conversation opportunity that they call City Gates. So where there'll be an article or a podcast or something that will be shared about a topic where people have differing viewpoints, and where there is a range of things that a Christian could believe could fall on in on these various topics. And so we just come together and talk about this and say, what do you like about this article? What did you not like about this article? How does this impact how we interact with our students? And there's also an opportunity at the end. We don't talk about that component of it, but how did you engage in this conversation? Think about what did you do well in this conversation? What are ways you can grow in that? And so I think having those kinds of opportunities for our staff, and not everyone comes to them, but they're a great way for us to practice that. What does it mean to love? Even when we might disagree, we can still come together and talk about these things. And so I think in terms of coming together in unity and keeping us focused, I think speaking to the core, speaking to the things that we do have in common, and what is our mission and what does it look like to love, I think that does bring unity. And working together is a great opportunity for that. When you go through hard things together, even if you disagree on certain issues, having to work on other problems together, I think brings together.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. How you can just talk about a thing. Discussion is very important, but the how to love each other, how to love others, it's hard work. So Chrissy Bryan says hi. She loves having you at BFA. Carol Dockery says, hello, Carol. She says, Orange Day is as real thing, but my daughter just told me this morning that she needed to wear her polka dot pajamas on Miss Ellen's next polka dot day.
Yes, we also, I also do polka dot week twice a year.
But you definitely need to let Carol know when the next.
Yeah, I'll make sure you know, Carol, when polka dot week is, so those pajamas can come out.
So what are your favorite books, since we're talking podcasts and everything else, books or podcasts? What are your favorite books on teaching and leadership that you can recommend to others?
Yeah, I'd say probably, this might be my favorite. There's a book by David S. Smith called On Christian Teaching. And it is one of my favorites for sure on what it looks like to teach so that your process also speaks to the truth of who God is and what God's kingdom looks like. That was been hugely influential as a language teacher in thinking about how do we communicate empathy in the classroom and that it means to communicate with one another. So yeah, that's a huge one. I just finished a master's program, and one of the books that we had to read for that program was called Leading with a Limp by Dan Allender. And that I really appreciated as well when thinking about the our places of brokenness as leaders, and the paths that we could take that would either lead to bitterness or further brokenness, or ways that can be pointing us towards more Christ-like leadership and embracing our brokenness and our weaknesses to lead well. I have not read all the way through this book yet, but I started reading James Smith's book, Desiring the Kingdom, and I have a feeling that one is going to be a favorite already. Yeah.
I got to write that one down because that sounds interesting. So Shane and April Hudson, who are in Spain, they're doing the 20-hour course. They're teaching probably about now or maybe next week. They said late April. So one of the things they mentioned, which I thought was notable, and we did put a graphic about it on WorldVenture social media, but what they said was, we believe that this material is like the content of the gospel. It is not enough to merely know it. It must change your life. So I thought that was an interesting thing. So it's not merely enough to know the gospel. It must change your life. What does that mean to you?
Mhm. Well, I think that's one of the things that I love about that Desiring the Kingdom book that I've started
Uh-huh.
reading, is it's talking. So there's more than just this knowledge that we have, right? Like, what do we love? And I think that the gospel is pointing us to a person, and do we love that person, or do we just know about that person? Um, and so, yeah, I would say that's been a really good language framing for me. I think, what are the habits that I have that point me to loving Jesus and recognizing my own brokenness and need of Him. So, like, even that the gospel isn't just something that's a one time, right? Like, okay, now I'm justified. Now I'm in this right standing, but I need that reality of Christ's redemption every day. And that becomes so much of my part of conversations with staff and students too, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this isn't just about knowing things. And even the classes that you're taking, how did the classes that you take help you love Jesus? Like, what does this tell us about the world that He's created?
Yeah,
He's made the world in a way that's beautiful and complex. And so let's think about how we care for that. And yeah.
I love that attitude. In fact, Chris Bryan says a comment, love versus knowledge, awesome point.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, yeah, totally. So what's involved in preparing your students when you were a teacher for the material you wanted them to learn? How do you know when you really got through to a student?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, so, in terms of uh, preparing the material, I think that there's one of the things that I always wanted to do was to still be learning myself. Because that, again, like, do I love this? Is this just, knowledge that I'm communicating? Or am I still excited about the process of learning? And so, yeah, be finding, blog posts or teacher podcasts or things that were, okay, how can I try something new that will help students. But I think the other part, getting through to them, is we also have to think about, we're not teaching content, we're teaching students. It's not just about the material, it's about the people that
Yeah.
are in front of you. And so, yeah, I think that how did I know when I got through, when I would have a conversation and a student was excited about something, they weren't necessarily even thinking about the fact that they were learning, you know, that
Oh,
they
that's awesome.
like, oh, hey, I tried speaking Spanish, today. I went down to there's an ice cream shop in town where the proprietors are, well, one of them is Dominican. And so, like, they'll be like, oh yeah, I tried to order my ice cream in Spanish today, and like,
What flavor did she end up getting?
question, I didn't ask that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
So Corby and Ashley White, who are in Poland, they did an outreach with their church, with coffee and tea, and we're thinking about these students. Some of them are Christian, some of them maybe not Christian, maybe not quite there yet. So what kinds of outreaches do the students or Black Forest Academy, what do they do? How do they make that positive impact to their surrounding community?
Yeah, that's something that I'd love to honestly see more happening. It's always a good conversation for us to talk, because we're such, like, proportionally, we're a lot of people in a very small town. And so, in thinking about, okay, I want our students to be thinking about, you're not the only ones that are here, right?
Yeah.
But there's some really, really neat opportunities. Like this year, it's been fun moving further away from COVID, some of the opportunities that our students have had to engage a little bit more. So service project trips were able to happen again this year. We had, over spring break, we had teams go out to 4 different countries, to be involved in various ministries. But here, There's a few ways. One, there's quite a few refugees in our area, and so there's an opportunity of refugee ministry where students have the opportunity to go to some of the refugee camps or just hang out with kids and play soccer. And we've got a number of students who do that. Something I'm actually really excited about this Sunday. So anybody who's in the area, um, this Sunday. There's an art show opening at there's a local museum, like a ceramic and history museum, and the museum is going to display some of our student artwork, and there's an art show opening, and they've got little artist statements to go along with it, and they'll have their artwork up for a month for people in the community to come and see that. Back in December, we hosted our concert. It was put on by about 6 different choirs in the area, but we have a large space for that to happen. And so it was neat to have our choir along with 5 other local choirs.
Nice.
At that concert. And yeah, there are some neat opportunities coming, and I'd love to continue to think about more opportunities for that.
Well, Joel has another question. He says, are there any Lutherans who attend BFA, and is there any conflict in Germany between the traditional Lutheran church and more Baptist-based ministries?
Yeah, there are some Lutherans that attend BFA, but it's not something that's really, like, I would say, talked about. Like, there's not a huge conversation of denominations that I'd say that I hear necessarily among our staff and students. They'll talk more about specific issues and theological ideas, but not necessarily denominationally. And as far as I can't really speak to the broader, I can just speak to what I know at BFA.
Well, Joel, there is Drew Brown did write that blog post based on. I think it'd be a good idea for you to read it. It really addresses different denominations, and it was just recently published. So if you go to worldventure.com/blog, it's second one down, I think, still. And if you go down there, you can read it, and it will talk about what hills we need to die on, and it talks about how we can work together. So it actually addresses your question, even though it's a book commentary, but it has Drew's kind of words to it. So I think you'll enjoy it, Joel. So basically, how is Black Forest Academy the same or different than the previous schools you've worked in? What makes it unique?
I would say it's unique in that the world is coming here. I think about some like specific examples of having taught Spanish in the States and having taught Spanish here. My students in the States, Spanish was the first language that they were learning, right? And so everything was new. I would teach in Spanish here, have conversations with students where we would be doing an oral exam, and they'd start to say something I'd have no idea what they were talking about. And they'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry, that was Russian. Or, and a student came up to me afterwards where she was just, and it's also so sweet, the apologizing because she was struggling with her spelling. I'm like, that's why I'm here to help you. And it's like, this is my 5th language.
Oh, wow.
No wonder the spelling is hard. That makes sense. Yeah. So I would say that that is one way, like in a really fun way, that the school is different. Another thing is just we do have so much transition there. BFA is unique in the number of students that come in as juniors or seniors and come into the school, or even with we have middle school as well, but there's no boarding for the middle school. So coming up to 9th grade, the class size will about double often because of the boarding component coming. And so there's a lot of transition and a lot to navigate with that. And it's you think about what we feel like in transition and think about, okay, how do you teach students that are in that place? It's a unique place, and I love it dearly.
Well, the joy and the passion certainly come out from you over you obviously, to me, because this is, for anyone who doesn't know, this is the first time I've actually met her face to face. I've heard her name. She has a really good, everyone really loves you. But the passion for what you do really comes out. And I do want to remind everyone, I did put the giving link for Ellen in the chat. I'm going to encourage you to kind of look it over, take a look at what she's written there and about her. If you have further questions, now's the time as we start to wrap up a bit. She is at 50% support, which is kind of low. So if you want to become even $10, $15, $25 a month, you can support her in that very easily. It's the change in the jar. It's the, whatever, change you collect over if you still use cash. I use card a lot, too many times. But I want to thank everyone for joining us. Since there doesn't appear to be any questions, just as a reminder, you can see our blogs at worldventure.com/blog, and you can explore at worldventure.com/explore for opportunities, workers, and all kinds of things where you could put some real world experience out there to bring the gospel, make gospel impact. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. We will see you next week with Rich Peterson, who is the Church Relations Officer. So Ellen, stay on. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ellen, for joining me today. It was a very fun conversation.
Thank you so much.
I should have burned my orange today, and I did not. I love orange, so I know. So anyway, thank you, everyone.